mass murder on the country's largest army post. A dozen killed, dozens more shot and injured. The gunman, an Army officer.
In all essence, this was a job that was hatched on the base.
He's alive, and families upon families just now beginning to grieve. Fort Hood, just over an hour north of Austin, the focus of a mass shooting investigation tonight.
In the last several hours, reports have been pouring into our KXAN newsroom. Updates on the victims, a flurry of activity happening on post, and new information on the shooter. And tonight, KXAN is bringing you extended team coverage in a special hour-long edition of Austin News at 10. We begin with our Shannon Wolfson live at Fort Hood, where some startling new information was released just tonight. Shannon?
Yeah, here is the very latest from Post officials. We've just learned in the last couple of hours the alleged gunman, 39-year-old Army Major Nidal Malik Hassan, is alive. There had been reports today he was shot and killed. Tonight we know he was shot multiple times but did survive and is in police custody at an undisclosed hospital. We also learned that the female Fort Hood police officer who shot Hassan is also alive. She survived after being shot as well. She's just out of surgery and in stable condition. We do know 12 people died and 31 were wounded when Hassan allegedly opened fire at the Soldier Readiness Building around 1:30 this afternoon. Army officials telling us tonight they do not believe this was a terrorist attack, but rather the work of a lone gunman. Now, 3 soldiers taken into custody after the shooting have been released tonight.
In this incident, when it immediately happened, there were some eyewitnesses that indicated that they saw some people exiting the scene, moving into 2 buildings. And again, what we took a long time to do is basically secure those buildings, question the individuals, and question over 100 people at the scene that lead us to believe right now that is a single shooter.
Now, this base had been locked down most of the day and just reopened a couple of hours ago. People are being allowed to come and go at this hour. When we arrived, there was a long line of cars waiting to get in. One gentleman told me he just wanted to get on base to see his son, who he had not been able to contact all day long. We are live at Fort Hood. Robert and Leslie, we're going to send it back to you for our continuing team coverage tonight.
That chaos began at 1:30 this afternoon when the first shots began blasting at Fort Hood. KXAN's David Scott continues our team coverage and tells us the chain of events.
An unfathomable tragedy here today. What could possibly possess a soldier to turn a murderous rampage on his fellow soldiers? Soldiers that he lives and eats with, soldiers that he trains and fights with. But it happened today. The rampage began at 1:30 in the afternoon at a processing center. There were many soldiers bunched together to go through medical clearing and so forth, when all of a sudden Major Malik Hassan walked in with a gun and opened fire. Fire on his fellow comrades in arms who had no arms, because this is a weapon-free base. The only people who have guns here are the police who patrol the base, and those weapons under lock and key used on the practice range.
I credit the first responders. There was a college graduation ceremony. We had about 138 of our great soldiers who are graduating from college in an auditorium some 50 meters away. And thanks to the quick reaction of several soldiers, they were able to close off the doors to that auditorium where there were some 600 people inside.
Eventually, Hassan was cut down, but not before 11 people died, 31 were wounded. The bombshell news we got just moments ago is that Major Hassan himself is still alive. They say his death is not imminent. And the police officer who shot him down is also still alive. Some good news out of this very dark day. They reopened the gates. The base reopened at 7 p.m. tonight. The FBI is on the base beginning their investigation, and security is going to be clamped down in the coming days. A dark day at Fort Hood. David Scott, KXAN, Austin News.
We get more now from KXAN's Erin Cargile. She spoke with numerous soldiers' family members today.
Among a sea of reporters set up outside the front gate of Fort Hood was Cynthia Wood holding a picture of her son Connor.
He is a beautiful redhead. He's a very lively boy, so I'm glad he's not old enough to be scared about anything.
The 2-year-old still inside the daycare on the military base where shooters opened fire. The toddler's father away on his 3rd deployment to Iraq, while Cynthia waits to have her son safe in her arms.
Yeah, that boy's getting the biggest hug he's ever had in his life.
Round Rock resident and First Class Sergeant Patricia Muse made sure all her friends were accounted for.
I mean, it's a relief. I mean, I've cried several times out here today because, I mean, it's very emotional, and you know, the Army is like a family, and I'm actually serving under the retirement.
Once the lockdown was lifted and traffic started stacking up outside the front gate, we found Anna Orton waiting for her fiance, who was on base during the shooting.
Initially, when I heard the news, I started to cry because it was one of those things where you kind of have a helpless feeling. There's nothing that you can do about it. Obviously, you can't get on or off base. I can't call him.
When he called with word he was okay, relief set in, followed by fear that someone else in this tight military community may not be.
It's so close-knit that everyone knows somebody, and I have a feeling tomorrow we're all going to wake up and know one of the names.
Now, names of those killed and those wounded are not being released as of yet. Of course, folks here in Killeen are bracing themselves for another very emotional day tomorrow. Live at Fort Hood, Aaron Cargile, KXAN, Austin News.
And several surrounding hospitals worked quickly to accept the masses of wounded victims. Some of the first went to Darnall Army Medical Center right there on post. The next closest emergency room, Metroplex Health System in Killeen. More went to Scott and White Hospital in Temple, and some were airlifted to Seton Medical Center Williamson in Round Rock. KXAN's Matt Fleener is live with more on the victims who were taken there. Matt.
Well, hi there, Robert. Here's what we know right now. One patient, a man, is scheduled to go home tonight, actually, after being shot in the arm and chest up there at Fort Hood. The other came out of surgery around 6:30 tonight after being shot multiple times in the chest and the abdomen. He is in stable condition right now. Both came to Seton Medical Center Williamson in the 4 o'clock hour today by helicopter. We don't know if these men were soldiers on base, but obviously there was such a space issue in Temple and Killeen that these two had to be transported here. The chief of emergency medicine here also said these men were able to talk when they came in. He said they did not relay details of the shootings, but when they did arrive, they said they could tell doctors about their family members.
Luckily, they were aware and awake to be able to tell us that versus, you know, obviously with some of the more critical and some of the deadly wounds that had occurred.
Now, we did ask to speak with that patient who would be leaving the hospital tonight through a hospital spokeswoman. He did decline an interview. Obviously, a very tough day for these two patients here in Round Rock. We're live here tonight. Matt Fleener, KXAN, Austin News.
Thanks, Matt. Of course, the big mystery tonight, motive. What would have prompted Nidal Malik Hassan to attack fellow soldiers? Here's an in-depth look at Hassan's background. Major Nidal Malik Hassan arrived at Fort Hood last summer in July, and his military and medical background was clean. The 39-year-old Army psychiatrist did his residency at Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C., followed by a fellowship in disaster and preventive psychiatry. So what would have motivated the Army officer to open fire on his fellow soldiers? Investigators are already trying to answer that question as families upon families now begin the grieving process.
It's difficult enough when we lose these brave Americans in battles overseas. It is horrifying that they should come under fire at an Army base on American soil.
Hassan, not married, no children, according to the Center for Traumatic Stress, had an MD and a Master's of Public Health. He was also a co-chair on the American Psychological Association Committee on Psychiatric Dimensions of Disaster, an unlikely suspect for this type of rampage, reportedly scheduled to be deployed to Iraq at the end of November.